Whereas Mr. Hassan says you did not discuss this. So the question is, did you do this on your own, or did you do this together with the board? Because the minister has no authority to do this under the Nssf Act. It is the board. Questions, this is the last round. We have another, Honorable Kakembo, then Honorable Baka.
Yes, between Metrobus and Nssf. And Tondeka. There was a meeting that went to Kapeka. You as the chairperson, do you see this as a proper way of doing business to move your board to Kapeka and visit General Salim Sare to discuss investment opportunities in Kapeka? In your own words, is it proper? Was it proper? Was it regular? Or it was some kind of political pressure on the board? Lastly, Mr. Chimboa, I know you as a man of great integrity, and I trust you on this. There are serious allegations with Nssf in regard to the budgeting and budget process. Who initiates the budget and under your oversight? Of course, the duty is on the board. Some of the members here are denying that.
Okay. Okay. Finish. Honorable, please finish.
That the budget is initiated by some board members, that they lobby for activities. And to me, I see it as irregular, and because it's not supported by any legal framework that the board members will sit down and start lobbying or initiating, activities to be involved in the budget. You as the chairperson of the board, is this true? If it is true, is it proper?
Chair, minor brief, just two questions. The first one goes to the two sisters on the board. Then you can answer. We have called you here twice. Do you see any biasness in the transaction of this committee? The second question goes to the chairman of the board. Under corporate governance, transparency, teamwork are some of the qualities that are required. In our file here, which we got from you, we are seeing 2 or 3 letters you are writing to the minister about one of your members not being cooperating with you. Could we expound on it for the committee to know?
Okay. Respond to those questions.
Thanks very much, Honorable Chair. This is the way I'm proposing we go. On Nssf Lule, I'm going to talk very briefly, and I'll ask the head of projects, the committee on projects, to conclude on the Nssf Lule. Now, on the issue of the appointment of Ayota as acting MD, I am still going to talk almost very little because I wasn't in the country when all that happened. There was an acting chair, and he's seated right here. So he's going to talk about acting MD or caretaker MD. So the two are going to be clearly outlined. On Metu and Tondeka, I will explain from A to Z. And on the issue of Kapeka, from A to Z, I will take on that myself. On the issue of the budget, I will still make very little comment, and I will ask the head of finance in charge of budget to say something about budgeting and the difference between provisioning and authority to spend, because the two are different. Then finally, on the issue of governance, teamwork, and the letters I wrote to the Minister for Gender, I will explain that from A to Z. So we start with Nssf Lule, Honorable Chairman. On Yusuf Lule, we got a petition as a board that there was something wrong going on with that project. So as a board, we decided to seek again assistance from PPDA because they are the authority. So we asked PPDA to investigate all the claims that were in the petitions. PPDA responded. And when they responded, management came back to us as a board. So we said, no, you come back to us as a board when you have a complete answer to what have been raised in the petition. So, and we want full support from PPDA, otherwise the project doesn't go ahead. So while all that was going on, we were overtaken by events. So I would like my colleague from projects to have something to add on.
Chairman, you've not concluded or clarified clearly. PPDA came out with a report,
yes,
explaining and stating that the grounds under which the petition was done, it was
yes,
right.
Yes.
There's a procedure that was supposed to be used, and you were supposed,
yes,
which was weighted, whereby financial score had 60%,
yes,
feasibility, but you played around with it. The ones who were in charge, not maybe
not
particularly, but whoever was in charge played around in order to favor China Railway, that China Railway construction company, to get that bid. Yet, is that true or not? According to PPDA.
You should be having the correct result from the PPDA assessment of that procurement. And indeed, they recommended that the procurement process, I think, be halted. And we should have, the management should have taken into account the variables that PPDA identified. So when the board met, and I think we certainly instructed management to go back and be able to look at what is it that it takes for them to terminate, first of all, the process, because it could not continue any longer, not continue in that phase. So that process has since been terminated, and a fresh arrangement is underway. So that's what it is.
So who exactly was in charge of that process which was done wrongly? Who tried to favor? Because there was allegations of over 40 billion that was involved, and then something to do. So who was in charge?
All submissions to IPMC are done by management. They have the management team which does all that. They do the analysis in line with the investment policy.
Is it part of the board? Because when you talk of that committee,
they are not part of the board. They are not part of the board. There are two levels. The board exercises oversight function and fiduciary responsibility over the management and running of affairs of the board. According to the investment policy, the management identifies opportunities for investment and appraises those opportunities in line with the clear indicators which are spelled out in the manual. They go through all that and they do the recommendations with respect to what they have assessed to be.
Then why did the chairman go ahead to, actually, if I could read verbatim from this letter, we have taken note of the findings and the fact that the alterations to the score do not alter the best evaluated bidder. That was the chairman's response, and he wanted to go ahead. You know, when you sit for an exam and you cheat and you don't get the pass mark, it does not take away the fact that you didn't cheat.
Doesn't.
It doesn't. So why did the chairman want to go ahead and proceed with this project?
Supplementary question. Just supplementary. Yeah, you said the procurement process had to be halted because of the advice. My question is, you have the in-house procurement team. Were you using the Nssf in-house procurement team or the external procurement team being sourced?
Procurement arrangements are entirely in the purview of management. Management is in a better position to respond what team they used for that appraisal.
On the same matter? But he has not answered that. Perhaps the chairman could answer, because you seem to have been insisting to go ahead, and actually PPDA still wrote back.
Honorable Masaba, quite frankly, I don't recall writing that letter or saying if it is there that it's underwritten under the chairman, really. Because the much that I do remember is we were expecting a comprehensive report from management to the board on exactly what has transpired between PPDA and the management over this procurement. So,
Chairman,
yes, please.
this letter was written by you on the 21st of June 2020 and it is signed by 2022.
Okay.
21st June 2022 and it is signed by you, the chairman.
Yes.
And still PPDA still wrote back to you on the 24th
Yes.
of June claiming they still stand their ground and they don't want you to proceed with that project.
Yes. But did we refuse it? If PPDA insisted that we do this again, I'm not very sure. We responded and said no. No, once PPDA states what you have stated, there is no way we can go ahead. Because you see, even if PPDA, the moment PPDA insists that we do something and we don't do it, we still have to come back to the board. There is no way the board will give approval when they don't see the final agreement of PPDA. Yes, very good.
Chair, the issue of PPDA really came to the board by virtue of being a complaint. The board would never have involved itself in a PPDA process because it is barred by law. But the only entry point we had was that a complaint was raised to the chairman of the board. And I remember I was one of those people who said, if the issue has been raised to you, let's refer it to a competent authority to investigate it, and that was PPDA. PPDA investigated it, issued a report, and it had some substantive recommendations they were making. Now, when they made those recommendations, there was a bit of some discussion, and I think that letter you are reading was probably given to the chairman to sign by management. Now, when it went to PPDA, PPDA insisted on their recommendations, and we, as a board, prevailed over management to comply with the PPDA guidance. Because I know legally it has implications if you don't comply. And indeed, management complied. They put in place a different evaluation committee who carried out the re-evaluation. Before the re-evaluation could be completed, there was another directive to change course and go for a different person, and which process management is still undertaking.
Members, remember you have a stakeholder you are going to interact with after. So kindly be mindful of time. Okay. Keep your questions brief.
There were questions that way. The matter regarding the appointment of acting MD, you were calling him acting MD, but I think he's a caretaker MD, and the two mean different things. So I wasn't in the country, but the acting chair is right here.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In the absence of the process of concluding the appointment of the substantive MD in line with the board recommendations, the board meeting which sat when we received a letter from the minister recommended that we, for purposes of being accountable officer at the head of the institution, since there is a substantive deputy, we can give him to hold in the interim until the consultation the minister was undertaking would be concluded. So it was just a temporary assignment. As soon as that is done, in order to allow him be able to head the institution and really take responsibility for the accountable functions of the fund. In any case, anyway, the deputy, under normal circumstances, is a de facto person to hold office in the event that the substantive is not available or he has traveled. Is usually the one who holds the portfolio. Just holding the portfolio in order to keep the business of the fund running. Because you can imagine, in the absence of the executive, whose recommendation was still undergoing consultations with the minister, what would happen? What would we be doing with the fund? So our fiduciary responsibility was just to assign. It had no bigger legal implication apart from holding. In any case, anyway, is a co-signatory to the accounts of the fund and also the operation of the fund, even in the presence of the substantive MD. So we thought it better that he is the most senior officer with a substantive appointment at the level of a deputy MD, and we assessed as a board that he would be the best person to hold office until a substantive person is appointed. I am the one signing it in the absence of the chair. I think I used the word acting.
But the chairman is saying, is now educating us that the two words are different.
Chair.
Well, acting, caretaker, holding fort, in the interim. I think I used some words. Okay, Agnes, please, can you
Yes, Chair.
Can you use the
Thank you.
proper word?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the acting chairman, who also at the time said he was holding fort, actually used the word caretaker. And some information for the committee chair. I see that on 12th January 2023, the chairman actually sought the guidance of the Solicitor General on that aspect. And Chair, I would like that we can share this letter with the committee, where there was a request for legal advice on the appointment of the Deputy Managing Director as a caretaker of the office of the MD. I'll share that later. And Chair, since I have the floor, if you'll indulge me, I also want to have the record of the statements regarding the Mbale meeting, the issue that discussed the other allocation, just for the record, that thing, I think both Director Hassan and I are correct. Actually, not I think, we are both right. When we shared these minutes, Chair, with the committee, for the record on page 12 of 13 of those minutes, when the issue of the revision of the board remuneration came up, myself and the board administrator were asked to step out of the meeting. So it was an in-camera session. We were not privy to what transpired in there. So I just want that on record. And we've shared these minutes. And when we returned, we were given the resolution of that board meeting, of that session. So what transpired during that session, I was not privy to. For the record, Chair. Thank you.
So when you were asked to excuse yourself from the meeting for that period, and you are the secretary to the board, so who took the minutes for that period?
Chair, when we returned, we got a brief of the resolution which had been made, which is what is in the minute. Like I said earlier, for me, I go with the official record, which is the minute. So there's a resolution there which required a benchmarking exercise on board retainer fees with international companies with the same risk profile as the fund to guide the board in making recommendations to the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development to revise the board remuneration accordingly. The benchmarking was to be concluded within 2 weeks of the meeting. Chair, we've already shared with the committee a report of the firm that was engaged, Japheth Kato Consulting, which is what led to the proposals that were made following a proper benchmarking.
How much did you spend? So you hired a consultant to benchmark on how you can increase your benefits. Couldn't this have been done by... No. She was still making it. She's your lawyer.
Chair, benchmarking, it's not an unusual engagement. Like we shared yesterday, the head of HR, if you recall, talked about the survey that is done in which the fund participates. It's not unusual. So yes, it could be done in-house. The challenge usually comes with the ease with which you can access information from comparators. And this was to involve international companies, etc.
So how much did you pay this company to benchmark on how to increase the allowances?
Chair, I think it's not how to increase per se, but a comparison to determine whether a review was justifiable. Chair, we shared the detailed report. The amount, Chair, I don't know offhand. If you allowed me, I would avail the particulars. after this session. Thank you.
Proceed. If she doesn't know the amount, are you going to force it?
Off head, Chair, I can get the amount if you give me.
Maybe the chairman knows it.
Oh, I actually don't know, because it was the board just gave this assignment to management that do what is normally done in every organization. When you are going to take a decision of that type, you better look at what others are doing. And by the way, it's not only just saying the figure is so much and so much.
Okay.
There are lessons also for us.
Okay, Chairman.
Yes.
Where did you get the money to do this benchmark? Who approved this money?
This is in the management, I think.
But does management have the authority to make a budget?
The management doesn't, but this is part of their operational budget. When they do these surveys in HR, they do a number of other studies in terms of operations.
Shouldn't it have been budgeted for? Because in Nssf, you can't have money lying there.
No, it must have been somewhere in their budget block figure in the budget, which we approved a long time ago. So when an assignment like this comes in, it's an operational issue. The board doesn't come in to check how did you select the consultant and so on. No, we just get a report from management.
What was the name of the consultant again?
The name of the consultant, I think it was the Jaffet Kato Consulting, if I recall, because I think he's Jaffet Kato.
Jaffet Kato Consulting, JKC Consults.
Yeah.
Okay, kindly respond to the questions the honorable members asked.
I think there were questions that now we are working on going down. The next question is from Honorable Kakembo regarding Metu and Tondeka. I just want to make this brief. I was the founding chairman of Tondeka. Now, Tondeka's job is very different from Metu. Metu is a manufacturer. Tondeka is an operator. And the two don't connect because Tondeka's products come from Kira Motors. Now, what I know is from the record of management, Metu put a proposal to the management of the Nssf. And as usual, the investment committee went through the process, analyzing whether this is technically feasible, financially viable for the fund, and they brought a report to the board that it wasn't. Now, in the case of Tondeka, they have never even made a phone call, from what I have understood. They have never made a phone call to Nssf. There is absolutely no link at all between Tondeka and Nssf. The relationship is between Metu and Nssf. Yes. Now, the next point is about Kapeka. For as far as we are concerned in the board, Kapeka is a brain trust, is a platform for debate and discussion on alternative options to grow this economy. And the meetings that have been in Kapeka, or the particular one on 6th December, was about capital and labor. How does the fund help this country to rethink and reset the priorities around social and economic recovery of this country? So Kapeka is not political, the way many people are making it. For us in the fund, open-minded as we are and curious on options, Kapeka is a think tank, is a brain trust. The other question is about the budget. The budget is, I'm going to ask my colleague on finance to talk about do board members lobby budget items, the board members influence some of the aspects of the budget. My colleague will answer, but what I know is what we put in the budget does not automatically mean that you are authorized to spend it. When you put a provision in the budget, which we may approve, it does not necessarily mean that you are really going ahead to spend the money that is in there. So over to you, Finance.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. I think just maybe to start from the point the Chairman has made, when you are not to spend, when it is provisioned but you are not to spend, we put a rider. And the rider is very clear. Maybe we say you can only spend this after developing spending guidelines or the work plan. Otherwise, the rest of the other things can easily be spent in accordance with the bylaws in the institution. Now, how do we budget? The way we budget, you first look at the funding strategy. What is the strategy for the fund? Now, for this case, we have to look at the funding strategy for 2022-2023. Because when we came as a board, we found a 5-year strategy, and every year the board first approves a funding strategy. This strategy is based on the balanced scorecard. We look at the people perspective, people and systems perspective, we look at the financial perspective, we look at the customer perspective, and internal processes. And on each of those, management outlines the items there and also give us the lump sum of what each cluster of items is going to cost. We have a very detailed discussion of that. After we have approved this strategy, management then goes to field now to go into the nitty-gritties. Now, when they come with the final budget to approve, the finance committee, where it comes first, is more interested in the main budget header items, which we looked at. And that's why we said, as management, as well as the board, we did not go into whether this is a minister, whether it is a what, because that is a discretion of management. And it is a good corporate practice, corporate governance practice. Because when you take interest in the nitty-gritties, how management is going to buy sugar, how it is going to buy a toothbrush, how it is going to buy this, if they don't achieve their strategy, they will blame you that you interfered with the means. Because for us, we are on the what? On the how it is management which does that one. And so...
But Chair, I'm happy that the doctor is explaining well the way it's technically, and you are seated closer to Mr. Chairap from Finance. Mr. Chairap knows that once the budget is passed, either for the ministry, now I want to use my past experience, there is no item you can say because the budget was passed, you touch without going back to Finance to accept that now Alter will use this money. Because I listened to the chairman, he said, for us, once we have passed the budget, this corporate social responsibility, they know how to handle. And I think that's where the disease is. You overpass a certain budget with operation figure which is big, because the technical people know how to fight. And since you are not supposed to interfere with them, then don't blame them when you lastly we discovered that a lot of money were used by MDs and what have you, because you are the one who passed it for them. To me, there must be, you must borrow a reef from Finance. They know what they are doing. In fact, to the extent when I was a minister, if you have not used it, you return it, isn't it? At the end of the financial, simply because we are not allowed to touch and use it for another item. Why don't we borrow that leaf? In future, it's going to bring the good management of the funds.
Chair, we are speaking the same language here. Management is also not allowed to shift items at a certain level from one to another. But definitely the board is not interested in how many bottles of mineral water you are going to buy, how many of this, how many of this. We don't do that. But once an item comes out as a significant risk to the achievement of the strategy, like now this corporate social responsibility issue is coming, we have a risk, an audit and risk committee that continuously assesses the risk profiles of the fund. And like now it seems to be a problem, we seem to be picking it, that the use of corporate social responsibility budget is posing a potential risk to the implementation of the strategy, and we can assure the committee that this is now going to be our area of emphasis. But at the level of risk management, which is the responsibility of the board.
When they respond, we are running out of time.
Chairman, Honorable Chair, there was the last question which was around governance, and I think Honorable Bakablindi mentioned something about teamwork, cooperating and transparency and so on. Mr. Chairman, I would like to state, and I've stated this before, and I will state again. In my experience as a chair, this is probably one of the most wonderful boards I've sat on and worked with individuals who are all present here. I feel very proud, and I have no reason at all to doubt any of the members here in terms of cohesion and focus. However, there is only one member, and that is one member to whom I raised the issue with the minister. I told the minister that it is just 1 year, and I've had to write to you 3 times about the conduct and the behavior, the low level of decorum and etiquette that is required of a board member.
Who is that?
Was all. He was here with Sam Ryomugi. That's the one I talked about. And I've been consistent on that. And I told the minister very clearly that in governance we call it a member like that one rogue director. And what happens really is, if continues staying on the board, it becomes injurious to the board and it destroys completely the reputation of the board. So otherwise, with the exception of that one, I can assure members present here that we are a very dynamic and focused board.
Okay. We thank you. Which?
Let me answer. Maybe she'll add something if she has something to say. Yes. Thank you, Chair. The question asked was like our judgment, me and her, on this committee. To be honest, I've done board excellency performance, and the way I see this committee, since when you started, you have possessed integrity. You are so united. Your judgment looks to be on note. And when I look at, I call it good judgment. When you requested us to come here, you've been very consistent. The chair knows what he's doing at his age. I can't even imagine. Yes. I'm not just praising. Yes, I know all of you have done. Honorable Amos, Masawa, Honorable Richard, everybody, Honorable Baka. What I'm saying is that I cannot go outside there and say you are biased. Because the way, even from the way you were picked, the speaker assured the community that he's going to look for a good team. And indeed, I think you're a good team. Let's wait. And with my
I
assignment,
think you need to,
I gave an assignment.
you need to keep it brief. It was a simple question.
Oh.
You are now biasing.
Sorry.
You are now biasing the members.
Yes, Chair, I also have something I wanted to mention on insurance, medical insurance, just something small. As a health worker, Sister Penina just mentioned something that good practice. The way how this thing came to the board, the management gave us a scenario of a chairman who got sick. I don't know whether it was during COVID. And I want to tell you members that the bills for most of the hospitals came to be even up to 50 million. You saw what was happening. And you can imagine if a board member, I know we are not privileged to have that, but you can imagine if someone gets a problem. On this board, we have different, of course, stakeholders. Like we have employers. Maybe they can be better. The other group is the government. You might find they are not even on that insurance. But the workers, I can say, they are vulnerable. So in case really as a board member, I see someone sick and the Nssf cannot even come in. And if it is to come in, if the bill is very big, it means that it will cause a very big problem to the accounting officer. So I really want us to be very considerate. It is not, we followed, I think the corporate secretary is here. She followed what is supposed to be done, and it was taken to the minister, and the minister endorsed it. But it was just a good practice because it is very...
I think what the member was asking, there was a contradiction on what should be the benefits of a board member versus a full-time staff. Now, when you go like to the example of Nssf, we have people like Mr. Agre, Dr. Mujisha, Mr. Patrick Ochaila, who are getting the 10% already from somewhere else. Now you have given them another 10% from Nssf, so they are getting 20% from wherever they are. Contribution to the same person. Now it's the same with the medical insurance. These are board members. You get medical insurance in Nssf, you are getting it somewhere else.
Chair, we were requested that those who cannot, it was not to everybody. That one was very clear by the chair. He said those who cannot, who do not have insurance. It was something to do with those who do not have insurance. And by the way, the board, I want to put it to you, the board is not well remunerated. The board is not. I have been seeing people who have come from the same board, and I know if they are told they were very corrupt and they have eaten money, they would not be like the way they are. Actually, I don't, one time we were doing corporate governance in a summit, and I asked the professor that I was asking about how you can develop the board and how you can remunerate a board. He really told us that management, the way you see them, they cannot work away without governance. When you see management performing, you know that the governance also is actually working hard. When I see what they give us,
don't
I
misunderstand
see
us. Kindly switch off your microphone. Don't misunderstand us, because I believe everyone, even us members of parliament, the issue is it done within the law? But you also have a right to fight for something you think should be befitting. But the question is it being done within the law? So don't get us wrong, but we have run out of time. You'll have to forgive us. Maybe just clarify on the issue of the formula, because our colleague you left behind was very cooperative. The issue of the computation of the former deputy MD. How did it arrive at 1 billion? Because we are not meeting you again and we are going to make a report. Court ruled in her favor for unfair dismissal to give her 200 million. You appealed not to pay the 200 million. Then you withdrew the case set out of court to give her 1 billion. So explain to us how you came to 1 billion. The second one, the members who left. There's a formula you used to calculate the board members, the two. Explain to us how you arrived at that formula, and you go. It's just that.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I think those two questions, Agnes, you can handle them very competently, especially the issue of, because you are in charge of the consideration for the former Deputy MD and so on. So you'll be able to be very quick on that. And where we are right now. On the issue of the board members who voluntarily stepped down, again, I think it's standard practice, which you'll be sharing with the members. Over to you, Agnes.
Thank you, Chair. Chair and members. The former Deputy Managing Director, Geraldine Sally, sued the fund, the MD at the time, the chairman at the time, the corporation secretary, for unlawful dismissal. That was around 2017. This matter has been on the litigation portfolio since then. We present quarterly reports to the board through the Audit and Risk Committee, where the board then reviews the portfolio and guides on strategy. When it comes to matters to do with especially former staff, the general principle is to try and settle them where possible. So there is always continuous engagement, even for all other litigation, because being in court, the longer you stay, probably means the higher the financial impact could be in the long run, depending on how the matter is resolved. It was in that spirit that an engagement was had with Geraldine. There had been a proposal earlier, so there was a case where a determination was made in her favor for 200 million, then 50 million as for contempt of court against the fund. The fund appealed. So every quarter when we present these cases, We are challenged. Is there any merit in your case in court? Are you confident that you will succeed as the years go by? So an assessment was done by internal counsel and with external counsel as well. And the position was it's a 50-50. It's a 50-50. So based on that, why 50-50? Because the fund lost initially. So what's the guarantee that you will succeed in Court of Appeal? That said, do we still want to pursue this matter? Can we reach out and interest her in some kind of settlement premised on the ruling which was in her favor in the first place? That was the spirit. So a computation done on 200 million plus the 50 contempt of court plus interest accruing to date came up to a figure of about, I think it was like 360 something, yeah? So we reached out to Geraldine with a proposal. Would you be willing to consider this, yeah? The discussions yielded, when we engaged also with external counsel, the discussion was, perhaps she was not in agreement. Could the board consider an ex gratia top-up? Ex gratia, discretional, taking into account the potential loss that could happen eventually if the matter is concluded in her favor, how long will it take, the legal costs, all that. So an offer of around 750 or so was made, I'll get the exact figures, to her at that point. So she responded following engagements with her, with the acting managing director.
Now what you're going to do, put all these in writing because we are with you tomorrow.
Yes, Chair.
The two issues, you put it in writing and you sign these documents and you give us all the supporting documents that informed your decisions on both matters.
Most obliged, yeah.
Okay,
but for the record, there is no board resolution for 1 billion, for the record. Yeah, but we'll bring the documentation.
Because for you,
Yes.
for you to, your decision is binding on the Nssf.
Yes,
You are the corporation secretary.
yes.
For you to agree to settle out and pay 1 billion, your decision is binding on the entire Nssf.
If it is indeed accepted, but it wasn't, it's not yet been adopted. There is no board resolution.
Maybe, Chair, the decision, I think the binding decision is a decision of the board. So when this matter was brought to the board, we had issues. We had issues with the proposal from management, and we recommended a review, and so there's no decision yet.
We shall interact with them tomorrow. We have a long day with them tomorrow. So wish you a good evening. And we thank you for your time. Institute of Corporate Governance. Can we have the AC off? I don't know. It is really too much.
Because we've not had an opportunity to conduct a corporate governance audit, which we have done on a number of institutions. However, on matters specific and which are public in respect to the statute, board composition, board character, those matters, those ones can be discussed. But as a preamble, we would like to inform the committee that the Institute of Corporate Governance was established in 1998 as a non-profit membership-based company limited by guarantee, which now has over 800 individual and 115 corporate members. Our vision is to ensure an enterprise sector that upholds international best practices in corporate governance. And we've got a number of corporate members who include the August House itself, Bank of Uganda, Standard Chartered, a number of banks, regulators, investment authority, and others. So corporate governance, we note, of course, that during the course of the hearings, a lot of that catchphrase of corporate governance kept on coming up. So the problem always is, what is good corporate governance? What is it that should be followed? And we just wanted to touch on a number of issues as far as Nssf is concerned, purely from the Act, the Nssf Act, the amendments, and what it is that is public. The number one thing that I wanted to comment on was the dual reporting. It's supervised by both the Ministry of Labour, Gender and Social Development, and that of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Dual reporting is sometimes referred to as a matrix organization structure, which has got its own disadvantages, as I'm sure you might have, I don't know, that you might have surmised during the interactions with different stakeholders. The disadvantages are conflicting instructions, which are most likely to occur, hence confusing implementation strategies for the organization, and also decision-making being delayed because several harmonization meetings are usually required to arrive at a decision. It's therefore advisable from a corporate governance approach that a hierarchical reporting structure with clear and a single chain of command should be adopted. Now, as far as composition of boards is concerned, there are two main types of boards. We've got an advisory board, which analyzes issues but gives recommendations to another authority to take the final decision. And then you've got a governing board, which is the supreme decision-making body of the organization with the final say on policies and decisions. Before the amendment to the Act, the Nssf board was actually a properly constituted governing board, which then changed now to an advisory board. In our opinion, we think that it should revert to a fully fledged governing body appointed by the minister in consultation with the relevant stakeholders. Then there's also the issue of the election of members on the board by simple majority vote by constituencies, which may not suffice in ensuring appropriate balance of knowledge, skills, experience, diversity, and independence, which are the things that are normally used when you're selecting board members. But in this case, constituencies will give you what it is that they have decided, and that is what it is that will be taken. The third thing wanted to, which also I've just commented on, the diversity of the board and nomination election of members to the board. We have a King 4 report in corporate governance, which we normally refer to, which emphasizes that a governing board should comprise the appropriate balance, that is principle 7, appropriate balance of knowledge, skills, experience, diversity and independence for it to discharge its governance role and responsibilities objectively and effectively. The composition of the board, as listed in section 3.1 of the Amendment Act, appears to tie the hands of the appointing authority, as several of them, 2/3 of the board, are elected by their constituencies without regard to the best corporate governance basics stated above. There's also the issue of staggering of the board to ensure that you've got continuity and also retention of institutional memory. It seems as if every time there's a appointment of a board, the old one is swept aside, and you have new members who then are doing a lot of learning on the job. The tenure of the board is also 3 years, renewable for 1 more term. The institute thinks that this is too short to achieve its strategic goals, which is normally set for 5 years. And best practices command that the board members should serve a period of 9 to 10 years maximum, and so that is probably something that that the appointing authorities need to look at. We also wanted to comment on the remuneration of non-executive directors. There are no standard rates for remuneration for non-executive board members, but according to the OECD corporate governance principles, it's regarded as good practice for boards to develop and disclose a remuneration policy statement covering board members and key executives. Such policy statements specify the relationship between remuneration and performance and include measurable standards that emphasize the longer-run interests of the company over short-term considerations. So this will always be a very sensitive issue about remuneration, whether it is determined by the board, whether it is determined by the stakeholders or the shareholders. So that one is touchy, and getting a resolution on it can be it will take a very long time. Lastly, Mr. Chairman and members, I would like to comment on and bring to your attention in 2019 April, the Honorable Cecilia Timogwal, the MP Dokolo Women, moved a motion on the floor seeking leave of Parliament to process the Institute of Corporate Governance of Uganda bill as a private member's bill. Unfortunately, she was not given leave to do that. It is our appeal that this bill is resurrected and enacted to enable the Institute to offer the required advice on matters of corporate governance to government and the private sector alike with legal authority. The advantages are many, but some of these are that the law will serve to provide for the registration and regulation of the standards and practice of the governance profession that will greatly improve transparency, accountability, and integrity of private and public enterprises. The law will further provide for the registration and regulation of persons appointed on boards, as well as the management of board affairs. It will require the Institute to issue certificates of registration to its members annually as a form of quality assurance to the public bodies, entities, enterprises, and companies on whose boards its members are to be appointed. And the country currently needs an independent body that oversees appointment of board members for public bodies, entities, enterprises, and companies. And all companies would then need to be inculcated in the corporate governance ideals which would enable the country to leverage its resources for investor funding on an international level. A copy of that bill was also handed over last week, and we hope that it will gain traction and be able to move. Finally, this is not part of our presentation, Mr. Chairman, but the issue I think which has been also discussed a lot as far as Nssf is concerned is the question of COF2 and NOTU. There's a lot of talk of workers' representations on the board. I wouldn't like to be controversial, but who do they really represent? There's misunderstanding, I think, generally about the representation of not specifically workers, but of the savers. It would be interesting to learn what proportion of the savers of Nssf are actually represented by these two, by COF2 and NOTU. Because the majority of the people that he spoke to have only hear about them when there's a little bit of controversy as far as Nssf is concerned. And, well, I think it would be interesting to look into that, Mr. Chairman, that representation. Thank you very much. Unionized staff were represented very ably by the unions at the time. They used to negotiate for their salaries, their bonuses on an annual basis. With time, what it is that happened, because maybe of the issues, employers probably became stronger and started sidelining the union. You will not find in any place of any employment place now unionized, a categorization of unionized staff. It is just staff. But then Honorable Bakavulindi has more history, I'm sure, on this, so I'm talking purely from a layman's. But one thing is that everybody contributes to Nssf. Definitely, I am almost sure about this. If there's going to be representation of savers on the board, then there has got to be a way in which the majority of the savers are aware, because I don't even know whether the unions, the membership, but I stand to be informed. I don't know whether they have, how many members is it that they have? I'm throwing that back.
That is very important. We should need to look at it. Honorable Gaffer and Honorable Baka, since he has been touched.
Chair, my clarification is that representatives of the unions to the board, it's not straightforward that they are actually savers, because within the union, the membership is of both savers with the fund and non-savers, including civil servants. So the proposal you are bringing, and it makes a very good sense, at one point, by the way, we may end up with representatives of the workers on the Nssf board who are actually not savers with the fund. And in the way they deliberate and make decisions, their interests may not really match with the interest of the savers, because after all, they are not savers. And that's how we are finding that some of the board members actually want to jump on Nssf to contribute for them to save. So in terms of how it is operationalized, because the nomination is done by the unions, would it be in the form of regulations by the minister? Would it be how? You need to also give us some more high insights on that.
Let Honorable Baka ask the last and we get a response.
Chairman, I'm in a position, I don't know if mine is a question. I agree with him when he was working in Uganda Commercial Bank. You know, one thing he did not bring out, I don't want to be looked as if I'm representing now workers here, I'm on select committee, is that during that period, the biggest employer was government, right? And now the biggest employer is the private sector. Secondly, during the earlier formation of unions, including mine, where I'm on the national chairman of Beverage Union, those who were working in industries alone were the ones to join the union. Those who are working in government were not joining the unions. But now we have allowed, including the informal sector. Now, when you come to representation, it's a tricky one, in the sense that if you are to see, let's consult all who are the savers, it has an impact of even representation in parliament, on youth, on workers, and people with disability. There are structures which they follow to come to the final stage of elections. If you are to look at it, that who are the youth in Uganda to be the one to elect, for instance, in parliament, you may lose the track. But you go for the organized structures, as the statutes are telling. You find there are structures for youth, there are structures for workers, there are structures for people with disability. I agree with you in principle of saying who should be, because I also look at scenarios whereby we get problems that I don't want to be seen as conflict of interest talking about some people. But where cases in Nssf, people have stepped there and they have never contributed to Nssf. And I think maybe in new regulations, you can say one of the criteria before you bring somebody must have been a contributor. it makes more sense. I think there's something to be done, but since I'm an interested party, I can't go beyond that.
Okay.
Yes.
Questions as to what to ensure that representation is there. I think there's also a problem. Again, it's a corporate governance thing that if you have an act where there should be interest groups, then again there you are unpacking that, because there will be a lot of pushback definitely. But Nssf, I think, should have a competent board which is there to ensure that savers' funds are invested properly and that they get the best, return on their savings. That should be the focus as far as capability is concerned and so on. But when we go into these things of representation, we will submit something, a proposal of how it can be. It might be a little bit radical, but we will give some.
Chair, I'm just seeking a small clarification. I've been waiting for their advice, because when you look at the corporate governance, a board is there to represent the interest of the shareholders, or in this case, the workers' fund, and direct it in the direction which they have agreed. Now, you mentioned one thing that I got so much concern, that when it was under one ministry, it was more of a governance board. Now you are looking at it as an advisory board. It looks very shaky. Why? Why do you think when it is due, it is a governance? It's more of a advisory rather than governance.
It's because of that is what is there in the amendment. Because you see, the Ministry of Finance is responsible for certain features of the fund. The Minister of Gender is responsible for others. So the board it doesn't have powers to do what it is that it is supposed to do entirely. So by definition, it is an advisory board, which was not the case before the amendment, because before the amendment, it was very clear. The ministry, the reporting line was very clear. But as you can see, they report to gender, they report to finance. So it is a bit complicated.
Okay. We thank you for being patient with us. And like I said earlier, we apologize. But we value your input, and we hope we can interact with you even on committee reports. And we shall be inviting you, now that we know your input and your willingness to give the input. Someone else would have probably given up or taken it the wrong way. But we thank you and wish you a good evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members.
We have an in-house to agree on how we are going to proceed tomorrow. Kindly move closer.